room session. Just hanging out in the living room, having a blast. I changed positions, guys. You're no longer looking at that side of the wall. You're now looking at this one. It's very different. It's very professional. I view this side of the living room to be like the more professional side of the living room. But I thought it'd be fun to just kind of hang out with you guys. And as well, I have some thoughts about some things. Go figure. I watched something and I've got some thoughts. So hop into the chat like normal. We'll interact there. But I saw something. As soon as I saw the thumbnail, I was like, oh man, I'm going to have so many thoughts about this thing. First, I want to say hi to everybody who's in the chat. We've got War Hardenstein was here. Kip Lepton, Woke Christian, greetings, Dean, and all. Brett's here. David Collins, what's up, fam? I hope you're doing well, man. Caveat Ties, hey, hey. And Caleb is here, something completely outside my realm. Curious who these people are. Yeah, let's talk about it. So I watched this video because it came across YouTube was like, hey, you like Christian stuff, so here's some Christian stuff. And so I watched the Christian stuff, but mostly because of the thumbnail. As soon as I see two very much like when you start talking about like celebrity pastors and how they view everything through like this lens of like the corporate world, like everyone always jumps to that. Like these guys are very much like the epitome of that, like just very corporate. um and Carey Nieuwhof, I haven't been quiet on my channel about him and how I view him as dangerous as far as who he platforms, the questions that he asked them. Like he had Mark Driscoll on back in the day. Like he was like the first one to welcome Mark Driscoll back into ministry and totally underplayed everything that happened at Mars Hill. But like I got a little bit of a bias that I'm not a fan of that guy. But I saw in the thumbnail, what's up, Wendy? I saw in the thumbnail abuse, dynamics of abuse at oh, now I'm blanking at the church name. What is the church name in Chicago? Willow Creek. Okay. Oh, that almost went bad. All right. I know it. Okay. But I saw that thumbnail and I was like, okay, let's listen to the corporate guys talk about church hurt and abuse. And like I was fully expecting to not agree, and I didn't agree. But also, I thought that there were some real moments that I think are actually helpful in a way to point out because uh, I talk a lot about abuse, and again, I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy who has learned a lot over the years, and I've. It's not to say like I've 100% gotten it right all the time, or always had the right thoughts, always said the right things. I know I definitely have not, but I've learned a lot over the years. And it seems like a lot of other people who've been in ministry for far longer than I have, just like they just refuse to learn. So like I always want to say that I am not an expert. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I have some thoughts and I have some insights that I think are helpful when it comes to like there's always this thing when people talk about abuse and within the context of the local church, they talk about cover-ups of abuse or how like it's always like a controversy, that happens, like some breaking point, someone gets caught up in something, someone sent the wrong text to somebody, an email to somebody, and next thing you know, they've been found out as being, this fake for all these years and doing all this stuff. I mean, just look at what's going on at IHOP Kansas City. It's that, right? It's like scandal and controversy because of like a breaking point. And a lot of times when people talk about it, they talk about like the people that kept it that way, kept it quiet, saw something, didn't say something, and like they talk about it as those people, the people who like perpetuate abuse and that like they're not the ones doing it, but they are allowing it to continue. Like you talk about it as like they're the evilest person, like they're just like the worst and like they're like these vile human beings and only a vile human being could do that. And I mean, we're all sinners and we have a sin nature. But in this interview, I thought it was interesting to hear how some other dynamics are at play too. And one of them being the corporate nature of North American churches, to where we have these systems that are in place that I think are really unhelpful for when abuse happens. They talked about in this interview, and I'll give you some specific quotes here because I don't have the video to put up here because I'm just hanging out in my living room. But like they were just talking about how everything went down, and this guy, this Tim Stevens guy, if you don't know, I guess I should say that, like Caleb was saying, not in my realm. Um, Willow Creek is a huge church in Chicago. Um, like just huge, huge. Bill Hybels was their pastor for many years. If you've seen or heard about the Case for Christ, it is the church that Lee Strobel was a part of, like in Chicago there. And many famous people have been involved at that church. They host like these leadership summits every year and plenty of other events. And it's been like everything that you think about Rick Warren as far as like, oh, church structure and how to run a church, that's kind of pioneered by Bill Hybels. He is was a megachurch pastor and just super focused on like the corporate, like, church is a system, you got to run it this certain way, and if you do that there will be success, like and like seeker sensitive, like all those kind of stereotypes are pretty much wrapped up in this church. And like there were good people there, like I you could tell from the way I talk about it. I'm not a fan, not a fan of it. But lots of good people came from there, good, faithful Christians who attended there. So it's not just throw any shade at them. It's just the way that the leadership structure was set up that was, I think, unbiblical, and I think turns out to have been very helpful with covering up this abuse and making it basically a way for the top, brass, like the tippy top. Bill Hybels himself was able to, be this way for so long without any consequences because essentially he was a CEO. Even in this interview, Tim Stevens is talking about how he came in as the new executive pastor after a couple rounds of different pastors. That was interesting to hear them kind of really skip over that. Like Bill Hybels, all kinds of abuse became a story in like 2019. And then they had another pastor come in, or two pastors, like who were on staff already. They became the co-senior pastors, and then they left, and it just like was constant like turning around for all these like basically employees. Like they didn't really act as pastors, they were employees of this church, and there was just constantly these leaders coming in and then coming out. And then Tim Stevens was their executive pastor going into the pandemic, which was interesting to hear him because he's a business guy. Vanderblumen, he worked there, which is a company that helps like the megachurches find their megachurch pastors, and like it's a power broker kind of thing. So he was helping them until he realized he was the guy. Which I will just say, the longer I've been around, the more often I hear that somebody on the search committee who like all of a sudden, I guess I'm the guy. And now they're their pastor. It just keeps on happening. So I think there's something to that. But anyways, Tim Stevens was talking about the changes that they've made and how one of the big changes was is that his door, is always open. It's just so weird to hear that kind of stuff, like about pastors. Like like the staff could just come in and talk to you, and that they weren't able to do that under the past leadership. And it was just like, what? Like, you can't go and see the senior pastor, and you're working with them. Like what? Oh man, I've been the assistant pastor, and I could always go into the senior pastor's office, and I mean, mostly just like asking questions about Greek stuff, but like, yeah, it's just the way it's supposed to be, right? Like, or even a congregant, you should be able to go and see your senior pastor and not have to go through some like red tape. It's weird. It's weird to hear that. But that's the kind of nature that this world is at Willow Creek, and those kind of churches with a bunch of satellite campuses and all of that. It's always like you can't go and sit and have a conversation with the senior pastor. And I've talked often about how that's a major problem when it comes into this topic of abuse, because like, all right, well, if you can't know him, right? Like as a congregant, you can't know that senior pastor, then there's no way for him to be held accountable by you. And then you look around and you go like, "Do you know the senior pastor?" And they're like, "Nope." And do you know the senior pastor? And they're like, "Nope." And then you realize that it's only like the staff that actually know the senior pastor. And the thing about that is like these guys are getting paid. like like they're getting paid, and they're also assuming things, right? Like they're also assuming that they should submit to their leader, right? And they're assuming that the leader has like the godliest of motivation. So there's a lot of um like bias toward like the senior pastor when you're on staff. So like they're not like the best representatives of like being able to be objective about the senior pastor and whether they're being held accountable. If they're the line of accountability, like there's a big problem. But that's what happens at a lot of these churches. So it's a big reason why stuff like the Bill Hybels stuff actually goes down. But then I was listening to him go on, and he was talking about like the changes that they made and some of the issues that they faced. And again, it's not just like the accountability for the senior pastor that leads to some of this stuff. I think it's also just the way that people are treated when they're trying to figure out how to correct the problem. Like there were a couple quotes that I want to give you from this interview of Carey Nieuwhof and Tim Stevens, the former executive pastor. There, I'm saying it again because new people are joining the stream and don't want them to get lost. But Tim Stevens, this is what he had to say. So he said he was talking about congregants, and most of the congregants, he said, got it when he got there. They wanted to be hopeful for the future. They knew that they had a lot of struggles, specifically financially. They had a lot of struggles because, you have like the senior pastor leave, and a lot of people leave, and then you have other pastors come in and they leave, and more people leave, and now you've got like half of your congregation. So there goes half of your money, maybe even more, because people are waiting to give you like the big donations because they think you might ruin it again. So they were dealing with all that kind of stuff, but yet the congregation was still hopeful. That's what he was saying. But the staff was a different story. And he said, like, some of these people were just hurt. But then he said, quote, there were people who were just evil. They really wanted Willow to fail. So, and again, he's not talking about outside people. He's not talking about like, former people. He's talking about people on his staff at the time, like these other pastors, campus pastors, people in the office, people who were paid and voted on in some ways, mostly by the elders, I guess, but which are not biblical elders. They're like other elders, and it's like basically they're like stewards of the organization. But essentially, somebody voted him in there, right? Like somebody said yes for them to get the job. And those are the people that he said, quote, there were people who were just evil. Now, I'm not a fan of Carey Nieuwhof, but I think he did a good job of pushing back on that, in saying like, all right, evil is a big word. So what do you mean by that? And when he was asked that, he said, meaning wanted Willow to cease to exist. I think there was a sense with the huge leadership trust fail, and so the institution failed us. There was a sense that large institutions are by and large run evil. They fail us because they're too big. There's a sense of this need to go away because there's no way to redeem it. So that's what he actually said. That's verbatim what he said, to that question. Why would you call these former staff members evil? Because they were thinking they needed to split up the church. Because they were thinking that there's no way to hold this organization accountable when the leadership is set up in this way to be so big that no one can know people, like, or at least the circle of people that know that top brass leadership, like, there's no way to, like, be in that circle. There's no way for people to join it. It's just like the executive pastor and a few others because they're too busy, because they're writing books and, selling the merch and like doing all the things. So it's just like, that's shocking. That's shocking that an executive pastor would look at people within his staff as evil for coming up with the solution that we need to split up the church, that we need to make it smaller because there isn't a way to hold this thing accountable with it being so big. And I think about the risk that those staff members took to work on that, to push that. And for probably, I'm assuming that they left because he talks later about it, eventually that mellowed out and whatever. But it's just kind of shocking to hear an executive pastor talk about staff members and coming up with a solution that actually, like, is a pretty helpful solution. Like, it's too big. We can't hold people accountable. That's been proven. Like, let's make it smaller. And maybe Willow Creek doesn't need to exist. And for an executive pastor to look at someone like that and call them evil, like, you could think they're wrong, right? Like, and he doubled down on that. He said it several times in this thing about how they're evil. Like, people can be wrong. People can come up with solutions and say, like, oh, I think they were thinking too small, or, I disagree with them there. But to call them evil because they wanted Willow to fail, and what is the success for a church like that? Well, it's numbers. And if you split it up, the number isn't as big. And so it's just, this is part of the nature, though. When people try to go within a local church, and maybe it's a big church, maybe it's not, maybe it's a small church, like probably, so many of us attend like those kind of churches, right? It's just smaller churches. Well, anytime that there is abuse, you can bet that the people who are trying to come up with real solutions are going to be, you know, just thought of as evil. They're going to be thought of as against the organization, against the church itself, sometimes even against Jesus. And that's all because they're just trying to come up with solutions. And it's not to say that, whoever comes up with those solutions, they have to go that route, or they have to, like, be listened to. Like, maybe it's just some random guy being like, hey, I've got this solution. Like, you don't have to listen to that guy. Like, I believe in congregationalism. So, like, you could outvote that guy. But, like, they're not evil. They're not evil for coming up with solutions to try to fix this so it doesn't happen again. And it's that corporate nature that I think exists in a lot of churches in North America, to where we hear someone, and if they talk poorly of the organization, they're looked at as a threat. Well, they might just be being honest about, like, hey, this is where this church is at. But there were a couple more things. There was another quote. Every single time, this was interesting. Um, I think I know who he was talking about. Quote: Every single time we communicated anything of importance to the staff, it leaked within 5 to 10 minutes to the bloggers who exist to shoot arrows at churches. You can guarantee that when he says that, he's talking about Julie Royce, like, because Julie wrote a lot of stuff about Willow Creek and was basically a funnel for a lot of different information. So it's just, or a megaphone for information. So it's just, I don't know how many times we got to hear this, guys, where, like, anyone who, again, talks, honestly about where things are at, they're looked at as a threat, a traitor, someone who isn't on the team, who isn't with us. They're against us. They're looked at as an enemy. When probably these people were just trying to get information to their church, because that's what he followed up with. Like, he was like, yeah, and we talk about something, and next minute the whole church knew about it. And it's like, shouldn't they? Like, what are we talking about? Like, shouldn't the church, like, at least membership? Maybe not everyone who visits on a Sunday, but shouldn't the membership know what's going on with this thing? Like, but he was like so like adamant, like this is such a wrong thing. And yes, the people who exist to shoot arrows. Then just following, like I'm finishing up on some of my thoughts here, and I'll get into the chat and whatever you guys want to talk about. But um, then he was asked by Carey Nieuwhof, like this executive pastor again in the corporate world, and he's left ministry. He's now, started his own business. But he's asked by Carey Nieuwhof, what are some of the greatest threats that are coming down the way for pastors? And like he gave like five or six answers, none of them about the Bible, like none of them about theology. Two of them I thought were interesting. One was he said, like right off the bat, it was like the second thing he said, employment law. If you're like, well, that's out of left field. You don't know how these corporate guys work, like these megachurch guys, like employment law. And he said he gave an example of a performance improvement conversation, is how he put it, of talking with someone about their performance. And he said it's a real problem. They'll put up their hand and say, I think I'm quote, I think you're abusing me. And he was saying like this was a problem that pastors will have to deal with, where people are giving performance improvement conversations and that people are claiming they're being abused. Um, I don't know how else you have to like not understand abuse for that to be like this is a real problem in the church. Like if someone's like saying that, I think it's a huge red flag for them as a leader. Because one, people don't just say that. Like I know like it's a conversation out on the internet where like, oh, it's snowflake generation and blah blah blah. I haven't heard anyone personally, and I've heard a lot of people claim that they were abused. I've never had someone claim that they were abused and then for it to be false. Never. And I've talked with a lot of people. Now, like maybe, it's subjective, it's just one person, but I'm just saying like I don't buy that all these people are going around claiming to be abused. Um Maybe it's the way that people are being talked to. Maybe it's the standards that they're being told to live up to as pastors, like that they're being held up to like this crazy high standard, and so they have to meet that, and if they don't, this executive pastor is going to come down and lay the law down and like do it in such a way that maybe he is abusive. like like it's like this is the problems facing pastors today is employment law, because he says it's so tricky, so tricky to work around that. He said, now you have to wait 6 months for an investigation into whether this person has been abused or not. And then you can fire them. Like, he didn't say fire, but like, then you can deal with the issue, is what he said. And it's just, what? What? But there were a few other ones that like I don't have on my notes, so I don't remember. But it was just kind of hilarious in one way, tragically sad in another way. That he's just like these are the problems, and you could be like, oh, okay, that's one random guy. But again, he was the executive pastor for one of the most influential churches in North America through a very severe crisis. He was their executive pastor, and if you don't think that those like lines of thought are out there amongst other megachurches specifically, because these guys, those are the ones who have really sold out for like this corporate, jargon, bringing that into the church for the most part, but also in smaller local churches, and the attitudes of if you speak out, you're an enemy. If you get information to somebody, you're an enemy. Like, come on, we all know how whistleblowing works. Like this week there's been a lot said about whistleblowing with the Boeing thing, but somebody's got to blow the whistle, and it doesn't make them a traitor. It means that there was something going on that they just could not get the information out another way. And most of the time, it costs them dearly. And anyone who has been the whistleblower when it comes to this issue of abuse or stood up to like the powers that be and say to executive pastors, senior pastors, deacon boards, this isn't right. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to tell people about it. The face back that, or the pushback that you'll face. So it's just weird to hear, it's laid out like this on a podcast that they're advertising like, well, let's talk about abuse. We got some thoughts about how to deal with abuse, and it's just like it's so contrary to like what the Bible says about dealing with people who are hurting. Literally, I'm trying to think. I listened to the whole thing. I don't think they ever mentioned scripture, like any scripture, even alluding to it. I could be wrong, but it's not jumping out to me. It was just a lot of talk about, the businesses. We need to do it this way. Like, it's just, whew. But they're advertising that they're getting their message out. Like that video probably has a lot more views than any of my videos, and like that's a problem. Like not because it's my videos, but just like that's what we're getting out. Like that's the message that people are hearing about how to deal with abuse. And like anyone who watches that who has been a whistleblower, like they're gonna be like, that's hurtful. Like they're gonna feel it. All right. Let me know your thoughts. I just wanted to kind of get some thoughts out there. I saw it and I was like, I can't keep this one to myself. Um, but I'll hop into the chat. I'm so glad I'm not streaming on Instagram. Made that mistake last week. Not going to happen again, or at least not very soon. Like I kept on. People who are there, they'll know. Like the filters, it was it was embarrassing. So I'm glad I could scroll the chat and not have like all these filters pop on. Hey, Laurel, how's it going? Wendy says Bill Hybels and Rick Warren were greatly influenced by Robert Schuller. True. Hybels fathered the corporate model and Warren the therapeutic model. Yeah, they are different, but they're also very similar, at least with the language that they use and all of that, and bringing in a lot of the corporate jargon into there. And like, don't ever make that mistake of thinking like it's just the jargon that they bring. Like they're just using the language. It's always like the attitudes, the atmosphere. They're bringing all that with. And when the church is a corporate environment, that ain't a church. Like it's gonna hurt people, and it's gonna be all about success and not about growth, like spiritual growth. It will be numerical. Britt says, "Yeah, headhunters for pastors seems sus to me." Yeah, like I get it. Like if you have like a huge church, like again, I think that a mega church is unbiblical. Like as far as like when you start getting into the place where again your pastor doesn't know you and you don't know your pastor, like I think that's unbiblical because like how is he supposed to shepherd like at all? Like he's just talking about screens and like seeing him on a screen. So like I think that's unbiblical. So I'm out pretty much on the headhunters thing right off the bat because I'm not going to think that like that church should be that size. And anyways, but I get that other people have a different point of view. So I get the necessity of a few, but Vanderbloemen, I'm blanking on how to actually say their name. Vanderbloemen, uh, shady, shady. And every time I hear that, I just like again, partially it's my bias. Okay, I was supposed to pastor a church. Many of you guys have heard this story before, but right as the pandemic started, I was supposed to be going and pastoring a church in Ohio in the SBC, and I had a vote ready to go, and one of the search committee members led a coup and basically split the church to take over the leadership there. And like obviously that's an extreme situation. I'm very thankful that it happened before I went down there. Like because that would have been a messy situation even if like he didn't take do that, but like to know that someone wanted the leadership position and that like there's an axe to grind and like there's a lot of stuff with that, so I'm very thankful it didn't happen. But ever since then I've kind of like just had my ear open for those kind of scenarios, and I'm finding out like there are more and more of that where it's someone who is supposed to be helping find the next pastor who becomes the pastor. It just keeps on happening over and over and over again. And it's like, is this like God's like main tactic for bringing in the next pastor, or is it just people wanting a job and then they like find a way to convince themselves that it's a calling and then they take over? I'm just saying. Like, I think there might be something to that. But yeah, headhunters is a whole weird thing. Luke Daly's here. What's up, man? Dean's a real YouTuber, live streaming from his phone. Bow, 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 bow. Yeah. Also, it's much easier like, because I can actually hear my kids well, like after they go to bed because there's 2 floors and like I'm not in the basement, and it's nice to be in the living room. It's just a little bit cozier. So this is kind of fun. I might make this like a weekly thing. And Heather's working, so it's like, what else am I gonna do? Find some dumb movie on Netflix to watch when I could be hanging out with you guys? Are you serious? I'm not gonna do that. Caleb says, that is one thing my wife and I had to learn the hard way. We assume the person in charge is qualified, been vetted. I wonder how many Christians get hurt because they have the natural bent to trust. Yeah. And it's not to say that you like are looking for those things. Like that's not what you're saying. And it's definitely not what I'm saying. Like it's not that you just go in assuming that there's like something that your pastor is hiding, right? Or like that pastor, you go to a new church and you're trying to find out, is this pastor like a good and godly man? And like don't go in thinking like, oh, he's got something. Like he's got something. Like there's some skeleton in his closet. Don't do that. Don't be like overly cynical and skeptical of every Christian leader. Don't do that. But also, don't be naive. like like people and people are sinners and pastors can sin. And if there is something shady, do some investigating. Talk to somebody about it. Like what's the worst that could happen? That person goes to the pastor and says, "Oh, this guy's been asking about you. He asked this question." Well, now you're probably having a meeting with the pastor and getting an answer from him. I'm just saying, like these it's not a bad thing to ask questions. Now, if you're going around and saying, like, this is what I think is going on, you have like some weird theory, that's gossip. So, like, don't do that. But, like, don't just assume, like, I like the way you put that, Caleb. Assume that the person in charge is qualified, been vetted. Don't just assume that, especially if it's a smaller church. I'll say that. A lot of things slide in a smaller church because they know how hard it is to get the next guy in there and whether the church will survive the 2 years in between getting a new pastor. A lot happens at smaller churches too, not just big churches. Tax collector is here. Thanks for having this in the evening, Dean. Yeah, man. Heather's working. She's closing. She'll be off in an hour. And then I have to make popcorn and we have to watch Survivor. So that's what we got going on tonight. And also, congrats on 6,000 subs. I appreciate it. I forgot to talk about it on Underdog on Monday. I know it's dumb. Like, I know, big word. It's not dumb, but I know it's like I don't know, stereotype for a YouTuber to constantly be talking about how many people are watching and how many people are subscribed. I get it. People don't like to hear it that often. But when you have to do the thumbnails and you have to do like all like the work of getting these things together and doing the graphics and all of that, every subscriber is a real victory. It feels like a real victory. Or streams like Monday. That was so cool, guys. Like, I was not expecting that. 140 people were watching live on Monday. That is the most I have ever had for a stream. Even like when the John MacArthur stuff happened with the Eileen Gray thing, a year and a half ago, that was my second most, and it was like 92 or something like that. So 140 on a random Monday, not talking about some big controversial thing. That was huge to me, and honestly got me thinking about like maybe we should focus a little bit more on this channel and trying to be a help. If all those people are coming and watching a random Monday stream, then maybe they want more. So I don't know. Like I'm beginning to think about that. I put out a feeler. You guys might have seen it in the community tab just to see, because like in my head, if we're gonna expand, we're gonna expand. And I'm not ready to say that's going to happen, but I'm beginning to think through it. But let me know your thoughts. David says, this is what happens when people worship the office of pastor and the church as an organization. He's abandoned discipleship and evangelism, just trying to keep a faithful, failing business alive. Yeah, I think that's probably what his goal was, for sure, was to make this church get back on track. I'm sure that's probably the language they use quite often, of getting it back on track, and that means bringing funds in. That means satisfying people's wrath, like, and sometimes that just means pleasantries and doesn't mean actual reconciliation. Wendy says, I've been the whistleblower at 2 jobs in 2 churches. And I'm sure you paid a price for that, Wendy. It's always hard, and people will always be against it. Even if everyone else on the outside is like, yeah, that makes sense. People on the inside, they never feel that way. You might have a couple supporters, but whistleblowers, they're never like, it's you blow that whistle alone. Like, you may have a few people who are like, I still love you, but you're going to blow that whistle alone. I've been there. I think a lot of people have. Caroline says, honest question: are some of these organizations really still operating as a church, or they're really just corporations using Christianity as a brand? I think the way you put that shows uh, what the answer is. It's 100%. You're right. Like corporations using Christianity as a brand, 100%. Now, that's not to say that each one of these corporations, like that, they have like the worst of motivations. Um, like, I'm sure that they love Jesus. I'm sure that a lot of these people are Christians, but they have a wrong philosophy of what it means to be a church, wrong philosophy of evangelism and like the gospel. Like, um, I mean, you look at Bill Hybels' stuff, guys. Like, it was empty, and it grew. And I think there's a real problem with that. Caleb says, "Touch not the Lord's anointed, Dean." I'm trying not to. Um, Britt says, "Got to figure out those filters, Dean." Yeah, some of you guys who were on that stream, man, like, I'm so glad that Instagram deletes that. Woo! Okay. Let's see. Yeah, hit the like button, Wendy says. I appreciate it. Yeah, if you hit the like button. 47 people watching me hang out in my living room. That's crazy. It is really crazy. Like, I don't know why you guys like me or why you guys watch this stuff sometimes. Like, I get it when it's like, everyone wants to talk about Johnny Mac, like I get that kind of stuff. But RJ says, hi. David says, that's so much worldly capitalist thinking. I love my little country church on the side of the road. I love that. There was a church that I was a part of that we used, like, there was an older member, Bill, who would talk about his church on the corner, his little church on the corner, and I just always loved that, because he was like, he just lived there. He just, like, for me, I moved from up here in Canada, actually, because it was the first year of our marriage, and we are working on immigration for Heather, so we were up here, and I moved from here to southern Minnesota to get that job, and I always just loved it, that, like, that's why I went there. But Bill, he just loves Jesus, and that's the church at the end of the block. Like, he just lived there. He grew up there, and I just always thought that was like such a cool thing. Um, let's see. Caleb says, haha, I can actually hear my kids. Has Meredith from The Office vibes. Where are the kids? Where are your kids, dude? You could probably hear my kids. Like, they're upstairs. They're not asleep. They should be asleep. At least the oldest is awake. He gets to have iPad time and get away from his brothers while we're like, the room downstairs is actually his room that I will build out in the summer, because we got to do some work on the basement flooring. We got a lot of work to do on this house. So they're all up in the upper room. The upper room. 140 people could fit up there apparently. Uh, but so we give him some time in the evening on his own, away from his brothers, before he has to venture into the chaos of his room. Tax collector, as someone who goes to a bigger church, not quite mega, I agree with the sentiment that the pastors should know the people. Thankfully, at mine, they make a genuine and intentional effort to do that. Awesome. Like that again, I'm not saying like here's the number. Here's the number. Um, it's capped off here. Here's what a New Testament local church looks like, based off of this number. And if you aren't in that number, like, or if you exceed that number, then you're done. Like that's not what I'm saying. But I think that there is a number. I just don't know what that number is, because it gets to a point where people can't access that local, that teaching pastor. Good night, son. He just wandered in, put the iPad down because it's bedtime. I'm totally ignoring it. I love you. Wendy says, I remember when you hit 2,000 subs or even 1,000. Yeah, Wendy, you've been around for a while. Um, Yeah, and it's been a long time. Slow growth. But in my defense, last year was really hard. And I had a very hard time staying consistent. So, but who knows? Who knows what this year has and what we'll be able to accomplish together. But again, for me, I don't focus all about the numbers. Like it's fun when it happens, but also it's just like, I know I'm very niche. I know, like, I'm controversial because I talk about the things that people aren't talking about. And if I wanted to talk about the things that other people are talking about, I'm sure I could grow a bigger audience, faster audience, but also an audience that, frankly, I would not want to have. Like, again, I've been in some of these like streams of some of these bigger channels, and I look at the people who interact and the questions that they ask and the things that they say, and sometimes like just vitriol in the chat, and I'm just like, I don't want that. Like, I love that every once in a while Michael S will message me and will be like, hey, we had somebody, you might want to watch this in the chat, but honestly, I don't have to like watch it like crazy because you guys are great and you guys have respectful conversations. And most of you guys who have been around here for a while, you get like, if you have a difference of opinion, that's cool, but you don't need to be a jerk about it. Like, and so a lot of these other channels, it just doesn't seem like that's a priority. And also, like, I get it. Like, the more people you bring in, like the more you're going to have it just percentage wise, so it might seem that way, but I just don't want any of that. Like, I love that I could just hang out here and not have to be like monitoring the chat. Like, I could read the chat but not have to be like, what was said. All right, so now we are entering into whatever you guys want to talk about, because Caveat wants to talk about Dune Part 2. And yes, I saw it. Like a good movie lover, I went and saw it opening night, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was so visually pleasing. Like, there are things that happen in that movie that sound dumb as all get out. All right, it's not a spoiler if you've seen the movie from a long time ago, read the book. Like, the dude rides a worm. The dude is on a different planet and he's riding worms. And that sounds stupid. It sounds like something like my 4-year-old now like would come to me and be like, I have an idea for a story. And riding worms. And it still looked epic and it was fantastic to watch. I just thoroughly love that movie. I don't like it as much as the first one though. Like, the first one to me, that's a game changer, because of is it Leto Atreides, um, Oscar Isaac. Great performance. I love that character. So noble, so righteous, and I really connect with him. And so when what happens to him, it breaks my heart. And I did not feel anything like that in Dune Part 2. Um, Granted, again, I've watched I watched the whole movie. I've read the book, um, and I've read little tidbits of the other ones, but the first book I read. But yeah, so I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. I love sci-fi, and it's one of the best sci-fi movies in a while. Arrival's still better. Oh snap! Luke Daly says, "What do you think of Mark Driscoll's reaction videos?" Oh man, I have watched, I think one, and I've seen Instagram keeps on being like, "You should watch these," and I keep on scrolling past because I don't want to see more of them. Um, and it's just, I don't know, man. Like I'm in the world, right? Like I am a YouTuber, so like I get all that stuff. I know it works, but it's just I part of me goes like, is this how I look? Like, do I do I look this dumb? Like, I just don't I don't see the point in it for a pastor other than building a brand. And like that's what I'm doing. Right? Like that's what underdog theology is. It's a brand. Like yeah, I hope it's a helpful brand, but it's a brand. Um I like that's what Mark Driscoll is doing, and nobody seems to care that the pastor is so focused on his brand that he probably like just look at all the content that he puts out. There's no way he is actually doing counseling. There's no way he's actually meeting with congregants. There's no way he's doing all the things that a pastor should. Um, just based off of like the 40 videos he puts out a day. Like he's a content machine, man, which is why he's succeeding. And I'm sure if you like Mark Driscoll, you watch those videos and it's probably enjoyable because he knows how to entertain an audience. And if you agree with his points, I'm sure that you think that those points, are great because he's a good communicator as well. But no, it's weird to me. It's super weird to me. It's the same thing as Doug Wilson doing it. It's like, okay, like, what's the end game for these pastors? Like for me, it's like I look at the movie channel specifically, and I go like, hey, you know what? Like I'm building a business. Like it's a business. I want it to be a business. Will it ever be? Probably not. Like just based off of numbers. but but like that's my goal there. Like a pastor building up his own brand as a business, like himself. It's not like it's not like it's underdog theology that he's trying to build up, or like I guess with Doug Wilson, it's Canon Press, because at least he puts out products from other people. But like Mark Driscoll is just Mark Driscoll. He's just like the product is him. So it's just I don't know. It's just super weird. So I just have a lot of reservations about pastors doing that kind of stuff. Friedrich Drummer. First time here. Why do you say that you're controversial? I say it because apparently everyone says it about me. Like, I talk a lot about abuse and I talk a lot about, pastors and what they say publicly. And I get accused of gossip all the time because of it. I get accused of a lot of things because I talk about public things. So, I've just kind of gathered that I guess I'm controversial, and I do understand. I've always been a person who speaks his mind, and sometimes my mind doesn't reflect the mind of everyone else in the room. So there's that. But I try to be kind about it. I try to be understanding that I'm in the minority on some of these things, and maybe the majority is the majority for a reason. Like I'm understanding of those things, but um, yeah, I get called controversial, so I don't know. I don't really think I am, but I get called that, so I just kind of go like, I guess it's true. But Dune 2 was pretty dark in a very spiritually vivid way. Um, nah, I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, there's like the angle of using a religious story as like gaining political power. Um, But I don't know, like, there's also, like there's some twists in the books of, like, at first you're like, "This is just evil." like what he's doing with gaining this political power through like this Messiah narrative. But then it's just like, well, was it for the best or not? Like, there's a lot of devastation that happens, but also, it's looked at as kind of like more morally ambiguous. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what Denis Villeneuve, the director, does with a third movie if they greenlight it. I would love to see it. Caveat says, I liked it a lot. Just a couple of things left out from the book I was less excited about. Yeah, a couple characters left out of the book, but they had a lot to do, and it's really easy to write a story where like a big battle commences versus making a movie of showing that battle. So like I'm gonna give the director a little bit of leeway to interpret how, like, what are the best things, the necessary things for the story. But yeah, and you guys agree Arrival is better. Cool. Soundtrack for Arrival is best in the last few years. um it's good for sure, and there are songs like I Guy, you don't even know how often I listen to movie scores when I'm doing, like, anything. Probably my favorite, score in a very long time is Knives Out, the first one. Um, I think it's Nate Johnson, like, it's Ryan Johnson's cousin, like, Ryan Johnson was the director, and, it's either Nate or Nick, who composed that. It's fantastic. Just I love the music there. It's so like foreboding, but also like classical. It's beautiful. I listen to it all the time. So that's probably my favorite of the last, like, I don't know, decade. I just really love it. And it wasn't even nominated. Wasn't even nominated for best score. Shocking. Jesus People SF, which I'm assuming is San Francisco. Yeah, but do any megachurch guys do that of getting to know people? I don't know. I don't know. I don't, guys. When I'm looking through the chat, I know, like in the time when you're writing it, it's like, oh, that makes sense. We'll be able to understand. But by the time I read it, like in 2 to 3 minutes, I've already talked a lot, and I go like, I don't know what that is. So, please be a little bit more specific, so I can answer the things, because I would like to answer, and it's probably a great question, but I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to with. Do any mega church guys do that? I apologize, but you also say, "Do you want Driscoll doing counseling anyways?" Good point. No, he's not qualified, and so no, he should not be doing counseling. But he is acting as a local church pastor, so there should be other things that he's doing other than making videos. I'm not getting paid by a church to make videos. Like, I just make my videos. He is getting paid by his local church to make videos, and it's about him. You never hear, like, all this stuff. And even, guys, the streams that he puts out for his church service, that's not Trinity Church, right? That's Mark Driscoll who went live. It's on the channel Mark Driscoll, or real, like, or Pastor Mark Driscoll, whatever that is. Like, that's what he is putting out. Like, he's putting out himself. He's not putting out Trinity Church, and yet Trinity Church is the one who's paying him like that. It's an abusive relationship, and they probably don't even know it because they're just fooled into thinking we have one of the most, you know, um, popular pastors, and he's going to do things, and they're probably along for the ride of, you know, we got great things that we're going to do, and they're probably fully convinced that like what they're doing there is helpful to the church, and it's not. um I was assuming it stood for Sioux Falls. OOSF, maybe, maybe, you never know, man. Johnny says hi daddy. What? Is that a new thing? I don't know. SF is San Francisco. Okay, okay, okay. Guys, if you have any questions, anything you want to talk about, hop into the chat right now because I'm at the bottom of the chat. And until I get more questions. I will just talk about YouTube and what I want to do with YouTube. And nobody wants that. So, I feel like I'm constantly talking about like, I don't know, what should I do? What should my YouTube life be? How much time should I put into YouTube? You say a lot of things in San Francisco use SF as a tag in the end. I'm from Southern California, so I get it. So that's why I assumed SF was San Francisco because like everything is. It's not Sioux Falls caveat. What are you talking about? You were just trying to be funny. Um, yeah, mostly joking because I live in Sioux Falls. Oh, now we know. Now we know. Everyone knows where I live, so whatever. I even thought about it the other day, and there are businesses that I've talked about being like really close to our house. And I'm like, oh, if you know the city I live in, and you know the business I'm talking about, it's pretty dang easy to find me. But whatever. If anyone ever wants to hang out, you can come and hang out. I have been recognized in public before, one time. Still super great. I never felt more important in my entire life. I don't know if she still watches videos. I'm forgetting her name even, but a lady like I was in Costco, in a city about 45 minutes away, and she's like, Dean, and I was like, what? Like in my head, like because I passed her just a couple hours north. Like, I was thinking, like, is this someone who, was at my church and, like, they, like, just traveling and, whatever? Like, I just don't recognize them? And nope, nope, they recognize me from YouTube. "I've been watching your YouTube videos." I felt so important, and I was so grateful that Heather was with me because she was also shocked, and now every time we go to Costco, I just go like, I don't know, babe. Should we be going in here? Every time I go in here, I get recognized. it's, it was funny the first time. 7 times later, not as funny. So she doesn't laugh at it anymore. Um, let's see. Da-da-da-da-da. You graduated from USF. Cool. Thoughts on Miles? I don't know who that is. Sorry. I don't know everybody. I don't know. Is that a pastor? I don't know. Um, what is the best commentary on First Timothy? Uh, I don't know who wrote it, but the pillar one, because it's all the pastoral epistles. I have it. I've used it. I preached through it. It was very helpful, but I don't know who wrote it. So, the pillar New Testament commentary set, like the blue ones with like the pillar on the side. I would say whoever wrote that one, and that one was really good. Um, but you can't go wrong with NICNT or um, some of these like the Tyndale set. Also, like everyone always bashes the Tyndale set. Tyndale's fine, man. Like it's all pretty solid. Um, but yeah. Also, there is another one. Um, the CSB ones that I don't know if they even kept making them. But like there was like exploring the New Testament or something like that, where like I'm gonna say the name. Some people don't like him, so whatever. Um, but David Platt was one of the main writers for it, and it was more of like really cheap commentaries, but it was like just kind of like sermon-esque a little bit. I really dug those, and I remember reading through the First Timothy one and being really impressed with it. But I don't recall who wrote that one. But it's the one where it's like on one side it's like the CSB, and then on the other side it's like the thing. It was basically a promotional thing for the CSB translation, but I thought it was pretty good. But um, yeah, I think David Platt was like one of the main editors on it. Um, Caveat says, "Nah, I love this area with Sioux Falls." Okay. Um, Upper class child says, "Can I hang out with you in real life?" Um, depends. Depends where you at. um, Kelly says, from one bearded brother to another, keep it growing, man. I don't know, man. I have had much longer beards. Like right now, it's kind of a baby beard. I trimmed it about a week ago. But I've had my beard like down to here before, and for me, it just gets really messy. Like I know, like if you do all the work on it every single day, like you can make it look okay as it grows. But for me, it just like it was too much work. And so I trimmed it. Now I do want like I'm realizing my beard is a little too short. Although I like the shape of it. So I'm gonna try to keep it shaped and grow it a little bit longer. But yeah, I've done the big beard. I've been the big beard in the room. And it's fun, but it's a lot of work, as you know. Uh, so it's I don't know how much work you want to put in it. Look up roads to riches. Okay, I don't know, man. If I don't know, if we've got any mods in the chat, just keep an eye out. Jesus People San Francisco, Robert W. Yarbrough. Yes, that's who wrote it. I do remember that now that you say that because it is the name that is hard to say. Second commentary styles in your time, expository sermons written down and academic super detailed. Two commentary styles in our time, expository, sermon written down, and academic super detailed. Also, like which one? Is that what you're saying? Like which one would I want? I will take the academic one over the sermon-esque one any day, but I also like uh having the sermon-esque one if I can, but if I have to pick one, I'm gonna pick the academic one because I could do the sermon part. Like I'll give the sermon. Um what? What happened? Like I feel like we're getting people that I do not know, and I was just talking about other big channels that get people in there like whatever. Okay. Do you believe that Christians should try and keep the law? The moral law, absolutely. Ceremonial law, nope. Jesus accomplished the law, so we are under no obligation to fulfill the law. But the moral law is consistent because God's nature is consistent. And also, Jesus confirms that we should follow the moral law because he talks about how his followers should. So, yeah. Uh, uh, so yes, about the moral law, no for the others. David says David Guzik's commentary is pretty solid. It's called "Enduring Word." Okay, all right. I haven't heard of that one, or at least it's not springing to my mind. Um, if you say my name, I will dub. Well, I'm gonna keep you in suspense. It's the bots, not the majority bots. I don't know. We'll see. Robots. I don't know if do they exist? Are they real? Can we actually have robots? Let's talk about another movie called The Creator. No, they're not going to do that. All right. I feel like we're winding down. I need to get popcorn going because me and my bride are going to watch Survivor, and I need to have the popcorn ready to go because it starts pretty soon. But I have another like 3 minutes I could give you. I can give you 3 more minutes, okay? So anything that you want to ask, you want to talk about, you want to just be like, guy, why are you this way? Now's your shot. Now is your opportunity. And it's just like the wedding ceremony where if you don't speak now forever you will hold your peace. What is fate sour, the TV show? What? All right, the bots are here. Why are the bots here? What is going on? Why today? Oh, I get it. Oh no, I get what it is, guys. because this is me streaming through like the new shorts feed. You probably saw it in your normal feeds, but this is through the shorts feed, which YouTube is testing out to send like live streams into the shorts, and I think that's what the difference is. Um, yeah. All right, I'm going to end it, and I don't think I'll be streaming through this avenue again because I can see how things are going to go. So, thankfully, we haven't had too much of it. Anyways, I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for hanging out with me. We'll still have Monday show, so be on the lookout for that. I will see you then. Bye.